This session is going to focus on a topic which may be as important as any single topic you can think of for the survival or success of businesses going forward. And just as important, for those of you in the learning business, the capability that we're going to focus on may be the most important for you to address with your leaders going forward. And that's the topic of agility. In this session, we're going to share a little bit of research that we've done on what separates the most accelerating organizations from the rest. And we're also going to talk about how we then came to define agility, why agility matters, and what you can do to raise the agility level in your organization. So let's get started. Let me ask you a question to think about. What do these organizations have in common? And as you look at them, these were great brands. They were some of the most successful companies in the world. And of course, they're all essentially gone at this moment. So what happened to these great companies? So we have a point of view on why they failed. One, they didn't pay enough attention to weak signals, which means they lacked foresight. Two, these companies, they got complacent. Think about BlackBerry, Nokia. They got complacent, they got arrogant. They viewed the iPhone as just not a very good phone. And there's an incredible video about the CEO of BlackBerry just saying, we're just going to focus on our phone and make it better. And they completely were complacent and didn't challenge their own assumptions. So we call that a lack of learning. The third piece is failing to keep pace with the customer's expectations. Think about, Netflix going to Blockbuster and saying, customers are going to be interested in streaming video. And Blockbuster saying, no, we're not interested in that, and rejecting their offer. So we call that a lack of adaptability. And then the last piece is being stuck in yesterday's business models. And that essentially is a lack of resilience, a lack of persistence to break through an old business model and reinvent a new one. So what you have on the right side essentially is a lack of agility, but we define agility as foresight, learning, adaptability, and resilience. And we're going to come back to that throughout this session. You've been hearing this, everywhere, but shifts happen faster. And our view is agility is actually the key to navigating those shifts. Look at the volatility in the chart on the left, upper left. And if we did that in 2017, if we moved forward, that would be even, going up and down even more with what's been happening lately. And on the right, you see disruption. But look at the bottom, the pace at which people adopt new technologies. Look at the radio. I think it took 50 years or 30, and Twitter was accepted in less than in 8 months. And if you think about Instagram or Uber or Box or all these new technologies, they're getting adapted instantly. And one of the things that we've seen, which is really making it hard for organizations, that new technologies, they're going from brand new to becoming ubiquitous in about 5 to 7 years now. So Uber, Airbnb, 5 years ago we didn't know what they were, and now they're dominating their industries. They're redefining their industries. And if you look at the right, something else that's just mind-boggling to me is you see that the organizations are lasting shorter. Since 1955, there's only 12% of the organizations still in the Fortune 500. And just last year, 26% of the organizations in the Fortune 500 fell off. So unbelievable rapid disruption and change in the organizations. So strategic agility matters because, as I mentioned, the rate of technology growth you see in that upper left curve is much faster than our ability to keep pace and business productivity. The chart in the middle, though, is the one I really want to bring your attention to. Because what we see is individuals are adapting to change faster than organizations are. That's our kids, that's millennials, that's those early adopters. And they're picking up on things like Uber or whatever the latest and greatest new technology is. Take Box, and the young people are trying to bring it to organizations. But organizations are going too slow. And this is where those of us in HR or learning have an amazing opportunity. So Astroteller is the chief of disruption, the chief of moonshots at what used to be Google X and is now Alphabet X. And he basically says, if we could just increase our adaptability a little bit, that would make all the difference. And learning is the single most powerful way to optimize adaptability in leaders and in key talent. And that's what this is about. You all who focused on learning in the learning business have an extraordinary opportunity to create organizations where learning becomes the way that we get people to change faster. So just a quick look at what we can learn from organizations that are super accelerators. We looked at organizations that outperformed others in and across industries and within industries. And there's just one key finding here. If you look across industries, from the fastest growing, highest margin industry, software, to the worst, which is unfortunately for those of you in it, food and drug retailers, as you see, there's a 19% difference. But if you look within industries, there's an actual 34% difference between those who are at the top and those who are at the bottom of that industry. So what does that tell us? It tells us that strategy may be less important, where you play, than how you win. And what our research has sort of has led us to is underneath those high-performing, accelerating organizations, there are certain things that they do better than everyone else. And these organizations grew faster than their rivals, they had higher margin than their rivals, and they did it without acquisitions. So, and this is just a quick list of the companies which, if you are interested, we wrote a book called Accelerating Performance, and we'd be happy to share that with you, or a white paper which we can share for free. But these companies did certain things better, and we surveyed 250 of the FT 500. We interviewed all 23 of those super accelerators who met the highest bar, and we looked at what they do differently. And as I said, the differences are not in strategy, but how well they did their strategy. And we came up with 13 factors that separated the best from the West. They all tried to do these, but some of them did them much better than the rest. And in particular, if you look at that chart, you'll see that, again, why we focused on agility, foresight, adaptability, and learning were the areas where there was the biggest spread between the super accelerators and the rest. So let's take a closer look at those 4 key factors. And again, we have an assessment that allows you to assess, to measure how high or low an organization is, or how high or low a leader is on these factors. And this is just, fake data, but it gives you a sense of where you might want to focus to raise the agility of the leaders in your organization. Again, so we can assess and focus in on strengths and weaknesses on agility. So let's talk about foresight. Everybody's been watching what's going to happen in, I'm going to date this presentation, what's going to happen in France. Will Le Pen get elected after having seen what happened in the US with Trump and what happened in the UK with Brexit. But the point of this is, in each case, our foresight, our experts' foresight, was really, really off. The ability to predict our ability to predict what's happening in the world has gotten worse and worse and worse. Sam Wang was famously predicted that Trump had 99% likelihood of losing the election. There was really no chance. He said he would eat a bug, which he then did on a TV show. But again, our foresight is really lacking. So here's somebody who had foresight, and we can learn a little bit from Elon Musk. So Musk believed that we needed to move towards electric cars. Even though there's this famous video about who killed the electric car, which shows how all of the industries, automobile, oil and gas, are lined up against electric cars. But his idea was, he thought, if we can make a car that's sexy, that's fast, that's compelling, that people want to drive, not just for its eco-friendly nature, he could create demand. And in fact, he did just that. He also believed that he could reinvent the way you distribute cars, not through a dealer, but through showrooms, which he had designed by somebody from Apple, and change the pipeline, change the supply chain, that they would create their own batteries. So let's look at what Tesla has done. The Model S, which was their car that came out a few years ago, in 2013 was rated not just the best car of the year by Consumer Reports, the person who drove it said it was the best car they had ever been in. Two, over 400,000 people, probably close to 500,000 now, have signed up for the Model 3 Tesla, which is the cheaper version, the sort of for the everyday person. The other one was $90,000. This is more like $35,000. And they're now producing batteries. They're producing they're developing a gigafactory where they've started producing batteries that they will produce more batteries in 1 year than all of the rest of the world put together, which is kind of startling. Those batteries are going to be for your cars, for your house, and his company Solar City will be the beneficiary of getting solar heat into those batteries to get them moving. They teamed up with Panasonic on this, and the COO said, I thought this was crazy, and yet here we are. By the way, it may be the biggest factory in the world, but moreover, Tesla, who everybody has been betting short on forever, all the investors said this could never happen. Their market cap is now bigger than Ford and bigger than GM. Kind of amazing. And again, it's because of foresight and the ability to think about possibilities and not be constrained by traditional old world kind of thinking. So what are the things, and again, this is the point, so that's a great story, but what do people do? How can you build agility in your leaders? One, help them learn not to make assumptions and to assume that things are more uncertain than they thought, like an election, like the price of oil, and build scenarios about what ifs. If people have to start thinking about what ifs and preparing for multiple possibilities, not just the one that you're counting on. Two, build an early radar warning system. Get people to go out and look for weak signals. Look for things that could be going on in the marketplace. Scan, explore what might be happening that could tell you about the impact for your business. And lastly, think like an activist. Don't be passive in your thinking. Don't be complacent in your thinking. How would we reinvent this business model? Always be thinking about how we would disrupt, because somebody else is thinking about that. Somebody else is thinking about how they want to disrupt you. And if you have the foresight to get there faster, then you can reinvent your business. Okay, so that's foresight. The next one I want to talk about is adaptability. And we talked about Tesla and GM. Well, there was a postmortem done by GM executives in the late 70s. Remember, this at its prime, they wanted to know what were they thinking. This was never written down, but GM had a set of what they called assumptions, or a mental model that was unwritten code, but it was the way they operated. And it had some of these elements. We're in the business of making money, not cars. We're in the business of adaptation. The last thing they invented was the automatic transmission. And by the way, Tesla is the first new successful car company in the US since GM, Chrysler, and Ford. Cars are about status. And this one, think about this one in the early 70s. The US market is isolated from the rest of the world. Anyway, the point is GM had this mental model, this assumptions, and they were not able to challenge it, and they were not able to learn and adapt that the world is not fitting anymore your set of assumptions. Just like BlackBerry, when they saw Apple, said, that phone isn't as good as our phone. No, but it does so many other things, and eventually it'll get better than your phone. So what we ask leaders to do, and what is so critical for adaptability, is challenge your assumptions. First, list your assumptions. Challenge them. Are they still true? Do they hold up? And then you can go from testing those assumptions to revisiting how would we change the way we do business, with a different set of assumptions. And again, this is something you can get leaders to do in a simple workshop, just asking questions like this. Which of those assumptions don't apply anymore? There's another book I'll mention called Billion Dollar Lessons, and essentially they looked at 250 companies that all failed over the course of the last 15 years. And the one thing that stood out from them, there were a lot of reasons, but one thing that stood out from them was there was a failure of challenge and a failure of being able to shift and be adaptable. And they said if there was one thing that you could do, and again, all of you can teach people in your organization to do this, is to employ devil's advocates, to actually get people to take the opposing view, to challenge those assumptions. And that's the single most important thing that you can do to help create an adaptive and a learning organization. So again, challenge assumptions with a devil's advocate. And the last thing I'll mention is the last thing I'll mention on adaptability is build digital dexterity so people become open to these new tools instead of fighting them and resisting them. Just real quickly on learning, is your organization a performance-oriented one or a learning one? All of you are trying to move the bar or move the balance towards learning. But, are you internally focused or externally focused? Do you reward consistency or fluidity? Do you, are you procedure-oriented or are you focused on risk-taking? So again, a learning organization you have to move towards the right. And again, we've talked a little bit about Google and Procter & Gamble. One of the things that they do particularly well is they experiment. They try things. Procter & Gamble's, everybody has this motto now, but they had it 10, 15 years ago. Fail fast, cheap, and often. But Procter & Gamble, what they do is they'll do 60,000 experiments in a year. And they'll go into an emerging market and they'll try a new fragrance or a new color or a new texture for Tide. And then they'll see what takes hold, what works. And if they get a good response, they'll try it somewhere else. And if they get a good response, they'll bring it into to bigger markets. But if they don't get a good response, they kill it. Because they assume that if they try all these experiments, only 10% have a chance of being successful. Google has been the master of experimentation. And what they do is they treat these like scientific experiments. They have clear metrics, clear ways of evaluating. Is it working or not? And what they have is the ability to kill the experiments that fail and then double down and accelerate on the ones that have promise. But they treat this they approach this with great rigor and great discipline. So more and more people talk about it. Can you create in your organization a culture and a capability in leaders that gets them to be more experimental? So create that environment, teach people how to try and learn from mistakes, implement rituals for regular learning, it's the 70 of the 70-20-10 in everything that they do after action reviews, debriefs. And what you all need to do is live on the learning edge. You need to really push the boundaries of how people learn, new tools, new technologies, new settings. One of the most powerful forms of learning today is immersion. Go out to digital, go out to Silicon Valley or wherever you can learn and immerse yourself in what people are doing. We have a lot of clients who are trying to get exposed to these new tools and new technologies. The last one we'll touch on is resilience, and there's just a great story about Sarah Blakely. You may or may not know her name. If I say Spanx, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. So Sarah invented Spanx. She was the youngest under 40 female billionaire in the US. But what's important about her story is it all came based on an amazing amount of resilience. Imagine Sarah's father around the dinner table when she and her brother were growing up. Didn't ask, what did you do at school this day or this week? He asked, what did you fail at? And then, what did you learn from that? So she built resilience along the way. Sarah wanted to be a lawyer. She actually failed the law boards twice, but bounced back. Then she said, well, maybe I'm good at sales. And she was selling fax machines door to door. Unfortunately, at the wrong time, as fax machines were becoming obsolete. So she bounced back from that. She went to Disney to try her hand as an Imagineer, but wasn't all that good at that. And one day, she's applying for a job. She's actually in the bathroom. She looks in the mirror, and her dress is all wrinkled. She's wearing a white dress and doesn't like the way it looks. she actually takes it off, she starts cutting around and gets things looking the way she wanted to them. But out of that, she gets this spark of an idea. Wow, why don't we create a more effective, sort of undergarment that really feels good, looks good, and makes everything fit where it's supposed to. And from that came Spanx, which has again become an amazing sensation, certainly in this country and increasingly globally. So what is resilience about? Resilience is about recovering quickly, moving on, being persistent, not letting it slow you down, because in this world today, we can't afford to let it slow us down. It's also about leaning in, and leaning into success or failure, leaning in to keep trying and to take on new challenges, understanding we may not succeed at all of them, but if we stay back, if we avoid them, we have no chance of competing in the new world. And keeping people healthy, creating a culture, again, which all of you can contribute to, of an organization that's healthy, that people want to learn, that people want to try, that people want to experiment, and that when you fail, you don't get hammered. You say, well, what can we learn from that? What can we learn from that? And that's, again, what people talk about. But all of you have an opportunity to create cultures that are learning-oriented, where we understand that failing is part of learning, resilience is part of getting back up and moving forward. So you can look at all these actions together, and as you think about building out your learning agenda, for particularly the leaders of your organization initially, maybe you can't do all of these, but pick and choose where you can have the biggest impact. Certainly, look at trying to help people think about possibilities and uncertainties on Foresight. Help people on adaptability, use and employ the devil's advocate tool and technique. It's so powerful and it's really easy. And once people begin to do it and practice it, it becomes second nature. 3, create learning machines, create learning organizations where people learn from mistakes, do after-action reviews, and incorporate that going forward. Take the lessons forward. And lastly, I would say, help people learn the tools and the skills to recover quickly and be resilient. So those are the things that differentiate the agile from the rest. And again, if we found one capability that separates high accelerating organizations from the rest, if you had to do one thing that has the biggest multiplier effect, it would be agility. So we hope that you have success in creating more agility in your organizations, and by the way, in yourself, because we all have the opportunity to get more agile, to get with it faster, to learn from those our children, millennials, Generation Z, all those who are coming, to be agile and moving faster, to take advantage of opportunity. So thank you, and good luck.